Great. First of all, thank you, Veronica, for a lovely introduction. Actually, the more and more I worked on this talk and deeper I got into this topic, the more I started to feel that the better title for this talk would be how not to get crazy running continuous discovery as a designer. But I promise I will be kind of true to the original title, and I will talk about empathy as well. As Tomasz and Adela mentioned before, product discovery is about answering the question, what are we going to build next? Basically, in discovery, you want to uncover and explore users or customers' needs, frustrations, and desires. I believe that all of us are familiar with Double Diamond or some similar problem-solving framework, where in the beginning you discover and explore the problem space, then you converge to a single problem definition, then you go into a super creative mode and design many different, innovative, or sometimes groundbreaking solutions. And in the end, you slim it down to one optimal and, usually not that groundbreaking solution. However, from my experience, many designers and many product teams see this as a static or fixed framework, a recipe they should follow, and it's not a bad recipe either. You usually get good results when you finish it. However, if you want to deliver something exceptional, you need to think outside of the recipe sometimes. Many product teams see discovery as a unique one-time opportunity to dive deep and learn about customer problems and issues, like a deep dive into a problematic or like learning week at the beginning of some project. And we can visualize it like this. Here on top, we have a set of features or opportunities going on in time. And here on bottom is the depth and the amount of knowledge we usually gather for a project. And that's a crucial mistake right there, to perceive what we do as separate projects or completely distinct features. Tomasz mentioned it and mentioned a very great quote from Teresa Torres about this. In a real product development, to consider user or customer needs or problems separately as a separate cases does work in a short term. You'll get a solution to it, but over time, the whole experience will start to feel fragmented, kind of disconnected, and in the worst case, kind of clunky. Why is it that? How does that happen? That's in part caused by the fragmentation and silos in the organization. There's this concept called Conway's Law. The product basically mirrors the structure of the organization and the communication in the organization. And that's something that's often out of our reach to address as designers. Or maybe not, but that's for another talk. Another cause to this falling apart is basically too much focus. When we focus on exploring a particular niche of the life or the problem space of our users or customers, we will necessarily lack the knowledge of their context. And the context can often be more valuable than anything else we learn. Continuous discovery is a great tool to get this context, to collect it, and to be able to learn from it. As Adela mentioned many times, the secondary analysis, for example. But it's a huge opportunity. So in the next couple of minutes, I will share with you a couple of things that helped me and helped us in our organizations and teams to do it well. I'm not saying that this will be a silver bullet or another great recipe you should just follow. Most probably not. Some of this stuff might come as a super obvious, but in my experience, I somehow knew this stuff existed in the background, but only after I gave it some explicit name, I could address and improve these things more. And as convoluted or off topic some of these things might seem, please bear with me. I promise they will all merge together in the end. And I hope you'll find at least some of it interesting or inspiring. So let's get into it. Thing number one, the information flows. Each of us who has ever took a part in a proper product discovery or exploratory research for something completely new knows it can be super overwhelming. There's all kinds of information floating around and worth noticing or consideration. Usually we get a lot of customer feedback, some stuff that's passively collected over time. We have active research inputs from the calls. We have stakeholder inputs, the amount of priority we should give to something, the bigger overarching goals and objectives set up for the upcoming periods. Or we have a lot of information about implementation limits. Okay, what can be done, what cannot be done. We have a lot of collaborative overlaps, meaning, okay, these guys over there are working on something similar or something that has an influence on the problem that you're solving. We get a lot of insights from sales teams many times, some reports from customer success managers. Support tickets are super useful source of information. And a lot of quantitative data we tracked, various analytics, business analytics, etc. Well, that's a lot of stuff, right? Deep discovery and focused exploration can be pretty stressful and overwhelming. And here you might be asking, like, how the hell are we supposed to do this and pay attention to all this all the time? Well, basically, you don't. And you don't have to do it all the time either. So you just have to be kind of smart about this. And the first thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need some boxes. And this brings me to thing number two, the three biggest boxes. If you take a closer look at all the information flows I mentioned earlier and try to sort them out in some meaningful categories or in some meaningful way, you'll see that you can put 99% of the information into three big boxes. It's going to be either domain knowledge, product knowledge, or organizational knowledge. So what does that mean? It's quite like general. Well, so the domain knowledge means this is the problem space of our users or our customers. Basically, what are the problems, issues, or desires that we are trying to solve for them? So to this box falls all the user or customer or market research info we have, all the knowledge we have about the issues they encounter. It's basically all an answer to the question, what are we solving for them? Box number two, product knowledge. This speaks about what are the capabilities and mainly what are the gaps of our product, of the stuff we build. Where's the tech and usability data? And what can be done with our product and what can we build to our product? So what goes into this box, you might ask? Here is a tiny overlap with the domain knowledge, stuff like case studies of your customers or usability feedback. But mainly it's about the capabilities of your product, its general architecture, and basically what can be solved and built with and to our product in a reasonable amount of time and effort. And the last box, the organizational knowledge. This is the knowledge of your organization. How does anything get built, shipped, basically done in your organization? And here goes the exact thing I mentioned earlier, the organizational overlap. Info about people and teams working on a similar stuff or something that influences your stuff. This might not be such an issue, or you might not think this is a big thing if you're in a smaller organization, but imagine you're in a huge multinational corporate and you start to discover that you might cater some need of some of your customer. And only after you spend, I don't know, 2 or 3 months working on it, you realize that, okay, there's another team on the other side of the planet that does exactly this thing. So, and you haven't contacted them. This is where the organizational knowledge is like super crucial. And another thing that goes here is are the big strategic motivations and their changes? Basically, the question here is who does what, when, and why. Well, all right. Now we sorted all the information and have it nice and systematic. However, there can still be a bit too much of the information, right? And yeah, thing number 3, balance, or the right stuff at the right time. And this is exactly what's missing many times in continuous discovery efforts from my experience. This is actually the most important thing to realize if you want to run continuous discovery in a sustainable manner. And to be honest, the path to continuous discovery is actually much easier and much more straightforward than you think. You see, if you're in a bigger organization, and in many smaller organizations as well, all of the information flows I described to you and categorized just now happen regardless of your attention. If you just need to tune in and add a little volume to that. The key thing is to tune in regularly and as frequently as possible, and to grab others in your teams to come listen with you, or to tell them regularly what you heard, such as Tomáš mentioned in his talk, with these weekly empathy moments after regular meetings. Of course, you will need to listen to different channels of information at different stages of your development process. First, you need to gain sufficient domain knowledge and to be able to understand the issues. And without paying attention to product and organizational knowledge, you'll rarely get something done. And by doing so, by listening to this information regularly and frequently, you can turn this into this. And what does this mean? What do I want to say with this? Basically, I'm sorry, I lost my notes for a second. Yeah. So this way you can gather and learn much more information, and you'll get much more holistic picture of the problem space. You can make better decisions and transfer knowledge from one opportunity or field to another. This is exactly what was Adela mentioning regarding the secondary research. And this is where the true magic happens, actually, when you get the big, but also detailed and nuanced picture. You can do a lot of so-called lateral knowledge, and you can gain a lot of lateral knowledge throughout the processes like this. Stuff that's not at the center of your attention right now, but something that has an impact on the object of your curiosity. Another key thing for maintaining continuous discovery is to generate a lot of contextual knowledge. And how do you do that? Well, basically by being a good researcher and not throwing information out. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you a practical example that's happening right now in the organization. Actually, right now I'm in the middle of a deep discovery dive for the next thing my product team will build. It will be probably an improved user management capability. And I lead quite a lot of exploratory user interviews and map out the terrain at the moment. And during these interviews, I basically gather data. That's the main function of it. Some stuff is directly related to the subject. That's the core knowledge. But overall, it might be at most 50 or 60% of the information that I learned during the session. And what about the rest? Some is just fluff. Okay, that's some small talk, chit chat, respondent, onboarding, offboarding. But the rest, that's usually the context. All the stuff that happens or is perceived by your user or customer, besides the pains or desires you are trying to learn about. Make sure not to filter out this knowledge, and make sure to record it and share it with your teams, because all this stuff might be useful or crucial, not just for someone else, but for developing your true empathy. Because only by deep knowledge of the context of your users, and it's many variations, it will be different from user to user and organization or organization. Only then we're able to truly empathize with them. Which brings me to the last thing. There is not just one kind of empathy. Speaking of empathy, it became a true buzzword in the design world, right? The original meaning and context made a lot of sense decades ago when our field started and there was almost zero attention to non-technical users. However, the mindless overuse got it quite bad rap nowadays. Many times it promotes the notion that we designers should focus just on the user. So the stuff we produce meets their needs, expectations, and standards. Well, that's certainly good, but it's not realistic. In order to build stuff useful and usable to users, we need to take care of many other aspects: business viability, technological feasibility, ability to address and communicate and manage it across the organization, or how well the change or the feature we're trying to make plays out with other parts of the product or initiatives, or more importantly, how does it work in the context of our user. And I like to call this thing holistic empathy. User empathy is an important part of the puzzle, but make sure you're not paying attention to just that one part of the puzzle. Or worse, just to a tiny fragment of the piece by ignoring and throwing away the context. Because the context and the repeated exercise in gathering it is what actually makes your empathy stronger and more powerful. I like to say that it's useful to develop and try to develop and nurture a mind of a collector and constantly ask which piece or view are you and your team missing and should integrate next. And as Adela touched upon in her talk, try to be in the position of being data informed at all time, because in the end, it's your gut feeling, your empathy, and your decision that will make the right call for your user or customer. And you can and you should train these. So, a couple of takeaways: how not to get crazy running continuous discovery, and how to train your empathy in your organization. Recognize and be aware of the information flows around your product. Tune into them regularly, often, but not necessarily too deeply. Frequency and regularity is the key here. Build and share the common knowledge base and do not throw away information. Spread it across your team and your organization. Each of us has a different background and pays attention to different things. Use this to your advantage. Don't be afraid to pull in big stakeholders into this either. And lastly, one bit of advice for designers specifically: take a step back. It's good and courageous to be an advocate for the users, but in order to do it effectively, to make decisions that are data informed rather than purely data driven. Learn to think in terms of impact. It will help you to communicate with your product managers on a completely different level, and they will be super grateful. And by paying attention and developing sense and empathy for the context, actually, you basically have an antidote to purely data-driven decisions, because you will point out the bullshit in there. And then you can act like a true facilitator and a middleman between all the various forces and information flows that shape the product in your organization. And I think that's exactly the role designers should have in any organization. That's it. Thank you. I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Peter. It was really inspiring. Thanks for the talk. I actually do have one question for you. You were talking about continuous discovery and training our empathy. So, but still, it was a bit too abstract for me. Would you give one or two practical tips what to do or how to implement this into everyday work?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, one thing that's really, really useful and that's really easy to do, is to be proactive with the information and context sharing across not just team but everywhere. You can view this as in this push or pull philosophy. Like you either can pull the information proactively from somewhere, or the information will get to you somehow automatically. And this is a thing that I'm trying to do in our design team, for example. Whenever I do these discovery calls and I learn something that I feel might be useful for someone else, I just proactively push them the information. I will send them like a timestamp recording. This is the stuff you might want to check out. And this actually, I started to observe that more and more people do this, and it's super useful and super, it alleviates you of many pains and many troubles throughout the process, because you don't have to search for it for something that's you don't know that there's some information like this. But if somebody serves you this information, it's amazing, and it's really nice, like a cultural tip to do. And you share the knowledge, and you build like shared ownership and everything, and it's really nice because it won't die with one person or somehow.
So sharing is caring, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
We have one question for you and Slido. So let me share it. Let's have a look. How do you work with the insights of empathy during the design process? What's your take on that?
Well, okay, favorite designer response. It depends. Now, actually, during the design process, especially if you co-design with many other people, and if you try to pull other roles into designing with you, PMs or developers, or as Tomáš mentioned, we're trying to pull in other roles from the organization as well. When you have a deeper knowledge and broader knowledge, and you have this contextual knowledge, your empathy is much better fine-tuned to detect stuff that might not work for the people, because we all have our completely different viewpoint on some kind of problem. And your job as a designer, when you build empathy and when you gather insights, is to gather as many viewpoints as possible on this, and to be familiar with them, and to be familiar with their validity and with their overlaps. And this is how you can work with that. This is how you can rely. It builds you the information you can rely on if you want to design something for your user that's going to be appreciated or useful, actually. I hope that answered that. If not, I'm willing to chat about it more.
Yeah, feel free to drop more like questions or specify the question if it wasn't answered.
Yeah, or use the chat in YouTube.
Yep.
You'll get there.
Whatever you like. So, okay, we have one more question for you, Peter. So, many departments have context about customers. Customer success, for example. Any tips on extracting them?
You should never get yourself into a position that you should extract the information of someone. Well, it's good to make friends in the beginning. It's good to ask them and explain them why do you need that information in the first place, and just to ask for it. I think that you've seen the talk as well, Veronica, lately, that there's really good thing to notice that we designers claim to be the voice of the user, but how many of us speak to users all day, every day? This is the case for customer success managers or for salespeople especially. My experience is then when you explain them why do you need that and how valuable it is to you, and how can it impact the pains they see in the people they communicate with, they're more than willing to share it with you. Unless there's some super siloed mentality in there. But that's, as I mentioned, for completely another talk.
Yeah. It's also my experience showing them your motivation, your why it's important to have this kind of information is really helpful. So communicate this clearly, and it's it does wonders.
And it basically impacts the bottom line for these roles because, okay, customer success managers or support people want to have happy customers. Salespeople want to be able to offer something super interesting to the customers. So if it's like, okay, I pet my bag, you pet yours. It's like this scratching thing.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.